So we all remember learning about even numbers and odd numbers back in elementary school. Numbers that ended in 2, 4, 6, 8, and 0 were even, and numbers that ended in 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 are odd. But why is this the case? Who decided to split numbers in this? When and why? Today we will be discussing those questions as well as why I myself got interested in this topic in the first place. Now, there are certainly some fascinating aspects about even and odd numbers. For example, if you add even numbers together, you will always get an even number. But if you add two odd numbers together, you get an even number. In fact, you only get an odd number if you add an odd number of times. For example, 3 plus 5 plus 7, or 9 plus 13 plus 15. But if you add 9 plus 15, you get an even number, or 3 plus 7, you get an even number. The other element is if you multiply any number by an even number, you will always get an even number. Even if it's like 2,637, which is an odd number, if you multiply it by an even number, you'll get an even number. Beyond just arithmetic details, there are also some fascinating concepts of higher level mathematics and mathematical theory. For example, even and odd numbers are both infinite sets. You have an infinite number of odd numbers, you have an infinite number of even numbers, but they're mutually exclusive in the sense that no number that's an even number is also an odd number, or vice versa. But at its core, why do we split numbers in just two ways? Why just odds and evens? Why don't we split them 3 ways, or 5 ways, or 10 ways? Well, first of all, I guess we kind of do split them 10 ways. For example, the number systems that exist today are base 10, in the sense that we have 10 individual symbols to represent the numbers 0 to 9. And even in other systems, for example, in Sumerian in the 3rd century, you had a base 60 system where the numbers were split into 60 even ways. But to simply cut to the chase, the reason why numbers are split into even and odd largely roots back to Pythagoras. Now, to set the stage as to where these ideas come about, you have to think, how did the Greeks handle numbers and how did they handle mathematics? During this time, most of the Greeks actually used dots to count, and much of mathematics looked at how can we split numbers into shapes. This is where you got, for example, square numbers, which we still use today, which are what numbers can be formed together to form a perfect square. And the numbers you all know are 4, 9, 16, 25, and 36. But you also had something called triangular numbers, and they were the sum of all the integers. So for example, you would have 3, which is 2 plus 1, 6, which is 3 plus 2 plus 1, and 10, which was 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. And so on. And these were called triangular numbers because they formed perfect triangles. Pythagoras also thought that 10 was the most perfect number because we had 10 fingers and they formed a perfect triangle. So for these reasons, it was seen as the perfect number. You also had something called oblong numbers, which were the sum of all even numbers that formed a rectangle. So you had 2, 6, 12, 20, 30, and 42. Likewise, the thinking behind even and odd numbers was based in geometry. An even number was defined because you could evenly split it 2 ways. You could have 2 perfect rows of dots right next to each other, and with odd numbers you would have 2 rows of dots, but then you would have 1 left over, so it was 1 excess of an even number. At this time, however, the number 1 was considered neither an even number nor an odd number. It was considered an even odd number, and the reasoning was because an even number was one that could be split, and an odd number was something that couldn't be split evenly. But if you look at the number 1, the 1 can't be split at all. At this period, the 1 was called the monad, or the unit, and it was considered the father of all numbers. Any number that existed had to be made up of 1s. So because of this, the very first even number was called the dyad, or 2, and the very first odd number was called the triad, or 3. And this is where those numbers start to come about. But again, I want to emphasize this was based in a thinking that was based in dots and based in geometry. Also, this was before the invention of 0 as well as negative numbers. When mathematics introduced 0 and negative numbers, they wanted to extend these definitions of even and odd numbers to include those numbers as well. And because of that, the definition was no longer based in this geometric way of thinking. Now it was based in the formal normal mathematical definition where you have 2n plus 1 and 2n minus 1 for odd numbers and 2n for even numbers, or its ability to be evenly divided by 2. Now, one fascinating thing about this philosophy of even and odd numbers is it fit very well into Plato's ideas of dichotomy. In Plato's view, all knowledge was based in the ability to find differences or comparisons between the two. The reason you could know something is because of an awareness of its opposite. The reason you know of light is because of darkness. The reason you know about left is because of right. The reason you know because of up is because of down. You know of something because you can compare it to the state of something else. And this was considered really the nature of which all knowledge was based. Now, that is the Greek philosophy and foundations, but I'm a big entomology nerd, so where did the words even and odd actually come from? By the way, if you're liking this video so far, please like and subscribe, and talk about your own favorite interesting fact from the history of mathematics, if you have any, or any comment you'd like to make. Now, for these definitions, I'm going to refer to the Merriam-Webster dictionary as well as entomology.com. The word odd comes from the following. Odd comes from the word otti, meaning point of land. Points of land so designated in Old Norse because of being roughly triangular. Otti was over time generalized to mean triangle, since a point of land can be seen at the apex or tip of a triangle, with the other two angles forming the pair at the base. The word otti was extended to mean odd number, the item of a threesome left over after the other two pairs had paired off. Scandinavians dominated the northern and central England in the Middle Ages, and otti was presumably borrowed into English at some point during that era. Current evidence has the word first recorded in the early 14th century as the adjective odd, meaning without corresponding mate, and by the late 14th century we see evidence of the word meaning unconforming or irregular. And even numbers have a very similar definition, even coming from the Old English effen, meaning level, equal, like, calm, or harmonious, as well as equally, quite, fully, or namely, as well as the Proto-Germanic ebna, meaning level, plain, or smooth, as well as the Dutch even, Old High German eben, and Old Norse jaffen, basically all meaning exactly, just, or likewise. However, a lot of entomologists are uncertain if the original sense meant level or alike, used extensively in Old English compounds as well. Before we finish up, let's look at some interesting history, which is the word even Steven, which comes from Chaucer's A Knight's Tale, where one of the couplets says, "It is fair a man bear him even, for all day meeteth man in unset Steven," which roughly translates means act calmly because you'll always face uncertain times. Anyways, this video was largely inspired by a interest in me, and that I've always been interested in why things are the way they are. Why is knowledge basically how it exists today? So we all know what even and odd numbers are, but I was more interested in how did this idea of splitting numbers into even and odd numbers come about? And I wanted to share with you all these findings. If you like more of these videos, I'd love to hear more ideas like this, and hope to hear from you soon. Anyway, have a wonderful day. Also, please like and subscribe. Thanks.